Welcome to STEMcoach, STEMtalk, Prepared Environment. I'm Brandi Nicholson, and I am a curriculum developer here at Accelerate Learning with STEM Scopes, and I've created curriculum from pre-K all the way to 12th grade. And for STEMcoach, as a professional development of teachers, I've really helped in creating development, professional development that can go to teachers any time of the day, wherever you guys are at, because STEM Scopes and ALI is a company where we are teachers, and we understand that you guys have full-time jobs, and STEMcoach is an opportunity for you guys to get professional development any time of the day, no matter what you're wearing, and your makeup can be off, and you can be learning to improve your classroom.
And I'm Lisa Weber. I'm Vice President of Professional Services, so I help work with teachers and make sure they can implement our curriculum effectively in the classroom, and also help teachers just be better at teaching science and help increase their pedagogical skills in the classroom. And we're excited for you to join us this evening.
Yeah, this is our first STEM Talk, so welcome. We're going to start with prepared environment with some pictures we want to show you and some questions. We want you to just think about your answers to our questions. Which kitchen would you like to work in? And why?
Which space would you like to relax in, and why?
And finally, which classroom do you want to learn in? So we get asked, what is prepared environment? It's not a word that we throw around in education circles a lot, and people don't know what it is. So we've come up with kind of two definitions of prepared environment, and the one I'm going to share with you is more idealistic, and it's based on Maria Montessori's interpretation of the prepared environment. And in that interpretation of the definition, we feel like a prepared environment is really a place where students learn, they can grow, their environment is allowed, it's limitless, it's inspiring, it constantly is a place where they are not bound by your space, but they can do anything they want and really push all of the boundaries of their ideas and their learning as much as possible. So it's really a place where learning has no boundaries.
But my part of it, let's be realistic. We don't want a scripted space. We don't want everybody to look like the exact same thing. I mean, I grew up with little chairs all in a row, and we all had to sit facing the front of the classroom. But we have to be realistic that the space has to be pre-set up so that it's effective, and you're not wasting all that time on management in your classroom. And how did this get started, really?
Right.
I mean, we spent 7 years helping teachers, elementary school teachers. They come one day a week to a training lab, and we would work with them on content and pedagogy, and we would go out and do campus support. And they had lots of things to choose from to say, can you come help me on my campus do this? And the number one thing they requested was, can you come help me organize my classroom and set it up so that I can teach science effectively? Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of where this all started. And 100 or so classes later, lots of closets and trash cans filled up later, we have worked and kind of come up with this plan to help make your classroom an effective learning environment. So right now we want to kind of show you a video of a before and after and how we walked through this with a teacher.
Yeah, one of those classrooms that we went and visited, and you'll see just kind of a before and after of her space and how we kind of helped her out and prepared her environment with her. We always went into classrooms together with the teacher. It was never just us by ourselves, and we got to know the teachers a lot. I felt like that's where a lot of relationships were formed. We were just going through people's trash and getting rid of things, because that's one of the most important kind of parts of the prepared environment. A lot of time is getting rid of stuff.
And be willing to get rid of it. I think we were much more on the side of, do you really need it? Think about your closet at home. If you haven't used it in forever, don't hold on to it. It's got to go, or give it to somebody else.
That's right. And teachers loved having, I think they loved having us in the classroom. It was like a first step into their classrooms, because we were really trying to change how they interacted with their kids, and we found out that by preparing their environment, it was a great first step to make that teacher comfortable with what was going to happen as far as when their kids were by themselves working, or when the teacher was with a small group working. So us going in and working with those teachers to set up their classrooms made their lives so much easier down the line through the year. Right. So I know both Lisa and I created some really great relationships with our teachers by doing that. One of the things that always happened was the teachers in the classroom, they would say, well, how do I know if my classroom's student-centered, or how do I know if it's prepared? Does that just mean it's cleaned up? And we actually created, through kind of these 100 of classrooms that we went through, we decided there's elements that are common in all of the classrooms. So we created a rubric for any teacher to take the rubric and assess their own classroom. And we've provided you guys that are watching with the rubric. You can click down in the doobly-doo below to access your rubric that you can look at. And we go into a lot of detail in the rubric, but you can just check off where you think you're at. And then in the STEMtalk tonight, what we're going to be talking about is we're breaking down each of the elements of the rubric, and we're talking about it. We're going to show you pictures. We're going to give you kind of our ideas, because the reality is we've been into like 120 something classrooms, and every space is different. There's not a single classroom, even in the same building, that's the same as another classroom. So they all have their own hurdles and obstacles, and every teacher has their own way of solving them. So you really get to you get to improve your rubric on your own. So we're just going to step you through that rubric, and please download it. Feel free to use that.
Yeah, and if you have any questions as we go along, we're going to be kind of watching Twitter and Facebook. Send them in, and we'll try to answer your questions as we work through each of these sections of the rubric. The first one I'm going to talk to you about is natural beauty. So how can I bring nature in and bring natural beauty into my classroom? Well, one of the first ways is with plants and animals. So you may be scared about bringing animals in your classroom. You can start with an aquarium. Bring an aquarium in your classroom. And how do I get an aquarium? One of the best things you can do, there's a grant out there called petsintheclassroom.org, and we've had probably about 100 teachers just apply to petsintheclassroom.org, and they've gotten everything from frogs, lizards, a rabbit, guinea pigs, aquarium, and they'll give you all the materials and whatever to set that animal up in the classroom. One thing to consider, though, if you're going to have an animal in the classroom, you have to think about what's going to happen during the summer with that animal. Who's going to take it home with them? Who's going to take care of it? But the connections that kids have with animals in their classrooms is immeasurable. Those kids learn skills that will help them, those working, responsibility. And we had kids all over the school. You'll have kids coming into your classroom all the time to come look at your animals. The other thing is think about the color palette in your classroom. You go to schools, and a lot of times they're just the same colors, right?
We say natural, and they think natural means brown.
Right? Or it's got to be calming colors in the classroom. But if you look at nature, colors everywhere, in plants, in birds, in flowers. I had a wooden wall that was, the closet in my classroom, and I had the kids paint the wall like the rainforest. I think the other teachers thought I was crazy. You're letting the kids paint. That's what they chose. They wanted to paint on the wall, and it brought in color. That's what they wanted to see. It's their environment too. So let them be involved in the process. One of the other things you're going to have to think about that's like everybody gets worried about is breakables in the classroom. What am I going to do with those microscopes, or those glass beakers, or that aquarium even? What am I going to do with glass and breakables in my classroom? Students are going to have to learn responsibility. Are things going to break? Yes. The last thing we want is microscopes way up high on the top shelf and they never use them. So they never start using the tools in science because we're scared they're going to break them. You have to teach them how to hold it, how to take care of it. You'll have, and we'll talk about this later, you'll have assigned roles and people will get used to it and how to store it, and that will help reduce that risk. But we don't want to just stop kids from experiences because we're afraid they're going to break something. They break things at home all the time too. So
that's right. They have to have the consequence of breaking it so that they can learn how to not break it in the future. right? So that natural consequence of something breaking, they feel horrible about it, and then they have to help you clean it or fix it or replace it. But that builds character in your students, and it makes them understand that when they're using those breakable materials, this is serious work, and they can take the work a little more seriously. One of the things that I want to talk about here, and then bringing the natural world into the classroom, is actually the outdoor habitat. And this is something that I want Lisa to share with you guys about, because as one of my mentors, it's something that Lisa really taught me. And I know when I went back into the classroom, I wrote a grant and got an outdoor habitat for my building because of her inspiration that she gave me, and I know she's given a lot. So I want you to talk about your outdoor classroom that you created at your school and how that's bringing nature in and helping kids preparing that environment.
So a prepared environment doesn't just have to be inside the classroom, it can be out. I worked in Houston in a rural school, in an urban school, 97% at risk. We had no green space. There was no grass, there was no playground. All we had was a little strip of green space between the main building and a bunch of T buildings. And it was fifth grade teachers, and we had 20 fifth grade students, and we decided we wanted to put in a habitat, and we wanted to put in a space. So 3 Saturdays in a row, we went out there with wheelbarrows and we dug, and we had a Boy Scout help us put in the pond as part of his Eagle Scout project. And we put in a butterfly garden and an archaeology site. The kids took some old picnic tables and painted them with bright colors to make an outdoor classroom. And they didn't want to leave. Their parents were like, okay, you need to come home now. And it gave them ownership. And then they got to display their habitat on our family science night once it was all done. And it became a learning environment. One thing about outdoor habitats is that kids need to get out of the normal lights and fluorescent lights and environment in their classroom. There's a whole initiative, if you want to look it up, called No Child Left Inside. Kids these days have little access to outside. And you don't just have to think of an outdoor habitat as it's limited to science. It's a great place for kids to go outside and read. They can be doing math. They can be listening to songs. It's a great learning place too, and helps stimulate them and helps them grow developmentally when they are in outdoor space.
Right. In my outdoor habitat, I actually, for my grant, I called it an outdoor classroom because it wasn't a habitat necessarily. I mean, it was a habitat. We had an outdoor space, but I wanted them and everybody in my building to understand this is a classroom. This is a place where learning occurs. Just like my classroom in the building, this is our classroom that we all share outside of the building. So that's a really fun and engaging. It's a way to engage your entire campus to bring an outdoor habitat to your campus, regardless of K-12. Those some of the coolest outdoor habitats I've seen around Houston. Even they have high schoolers out there fishing, and it's really amazing, kind of what you can get even your oldest kids to do, because everybody wants to get out of that building for a little bit of time, so it becomes golden, that time of when you get out. We did have a question from @BJ Elson, and she says, how do I get the rubric? So if you go onto YouTube, in the little comment box below, there's a link, and you can click on it and download the rubric from there. I think it's also available on STEMcoach.com. So, we'll put it there. So we'll make sure you get that. The next part of the rubric that I was going to talk a little bit about was order. This is really important for the student-centeredness of a prepared environment, because if your space is set up correctly and with the student in mind, then when you as the teacher, you don't have to do all that work. They can kind of do it themselves. The picture you're looking at on the screen is a classroom that actually Lisa and I both worked with. It was a big job, but we had a teacher come to us and she said, I need help because I can't be student-centered. And I said, why can't you be student-centered? And she said, it's just there's too much. I can't be student-centered. On the right-hand side, you see why. That was what it was looking like when she came and talked to us. It was because she was scared. The kids, it wasn't safe. You know, the lab area, this is actually in the back of her lab. It was open and accessible to kids. It wasn't safe. What you see we did on the left-hand side there is we organized everything. Everything has a place. It's labeled. Kids, now she can actually send someone back. They're asking a question. Oh, well, what if we added more weights to this experiment or something? They can go and get the weights themselves and bring them out and put them in the experiment. Everything's labeled. It's easy to find. I would have been afraid to send someone in that closet the way it looked before.
Or how many times do we have to start and say, where's your space? And change the teacher space in the classroom because it was taking up always so much space, their teacher area.
Right. And that's one of those, if you're going to make it student-centered, think about whose area it is, right? The students or the teachers. And that picture is a great example. She had said this was teacher space because she wasn't comfortable letting the kids back there. But after we prepared it for her and we created order, that's really what we were doing there. Once we created order, now it became a space for the whole class. And it wasn't hard to maintain, and everyone was happy and easy. The other thing I want to talk about is routines and jobs in the classroom. That also creates a lot of order, because if you have really clear jobs or really clear routines for your kids, then they don't need you to tell them exactly what's about to happen or what's going on. One of my favorite examples that a co-teacher of our coworker of ours actually gave was that she had a cup. It was a really flashy, blingy cup. And whenever she was working with a small group, specifically with them, and it was intense and she wasn't going to be answering questions from everyone else, she put the cup on the table, and then that way everybody knew, oh, Miss Elson is working with them and we can't go ask her any questions right now. But when the cup was off the table, they knew it was kind of open time. Or I know we've looked a lot with teachers who use the solo cups, the different colored solo cups. And if the red solo cup is on top, that means a group has a question. If a green solo cup's on top, that means the group's working really well together and they don't need a question.
And if you have the job roles, there's one person in the group that if they're struggling, they're the only person that can come to the teacher. So the teacher is not going to have a whole bunch of students coming up to them, or we're having trouble over here, we're having that. There's one person that has that role. All she has to do is a visual. I see a red cup over there. I'm going to have to go check that out when I'm done here.
And even one of the jobs can be, this person's job is to deal with the cups on the table. And that actually brings up another thing with order that actually I learned from Lisa, which is the groupings on the table. You have a table of 5 and put a sticker on each of the tables, a different sticker, but each group has the same set of 5 stickers. So the one that I learned with Lisa on was Toy Story stickers on our tables in the lab. And so whenever she would give jobs to the whole class, she would say, okay, all of my Buzz Lightyears, you guys are going to be in charge of whatever, and fill in the blank. And so then every table group had a Buzz Lightyear, had one Buzz Lightyear sticker. And then it was really easy for them to go, oh, that's my job. Now I know that's my job. And you can do something cutesy like, Toy Story, or for older kids, I think you can do something much more kind of appropriate for that level. In my classroom, I used famous scientists, and they were actually my table groups were famous scientists, and I rotated them. The kids were always really excited to see who were the scientists that were coming up. So I had like Madame Curie, and I had Nikola Tesla. I always tried to have male and female. I had people from all kinds of backgrounds because I wanted them to see that scientists look like us. They look normal, and they're not all these people in black and white pictures from 1,000 years ago, but sometimes it's someone from this decade, that looks kind of like them. And then also,
even if you wanted to use like tools of science, all my beakers are all my graduated cylinders, and then the kids have a visual reference again of what's that tool I need to go grab when they're reading.
Or maybe it could even be a concept that y'all are covering right now. Right? If we're working on habitats or something, you could have each group as a habitat or something. And then your stickers on your tables could be different animals within the habitat, or different tools that y'all are using that might be really pertinent to your grade level or to what you're doing. So there's ways to make, even that is something as simple as just organizing your classroom. Now it's a teaching opportunity, and now that's getting kind of put in their brains. So there's really, I love those kinds of subliminal teaching things that we can do with our kids. So that's a great place for order. Another place for order, this is a pet peeve I think of Lisa and mine, which is when we have all of that material, especially science. We're really bad with this. We have so much stuff. how do we organize it? And there's lots of ways you can organize it. We, in one of our lab that we worked at, one of our organizational systems, we changed it a lot, but at one point it became alphabetical. So it was A to Z. Because the person in charge of the lab, they were like, look, I don't know if it's physical, earth, or life. I just know if it starts with an A or if it starts with a B or a C. The picture we're showing right now is a teacher in a classroom where she organized everything with, this is the front of her classroom, and she has it organized with this is what is available to the students right now. So that's like her crayons and her markers and her pencils, and she has balance beams and things that she kind of thought were everyday things that the kids needed to have control over. And then in the back she has it by reporting category. Right. So she has earth, an earth category, a life category, and the physical science category.
People process differently, and we've gone to some classrooms and we're like, okay, you have your stuff this way, and like Brandi was saying, some teachers are like, I just can't remember that. Just let me put everything alphabetically. If I need batteries, I'll go to B. But if you want to try to organize it like by content, it's really, you're going to notice that you're going to have very little stuff for life science because it's living things. You might have seeds and some yarn, little stuff. Earth and space, you got to find a space low for all that rock, gravel, and soil. And because it's going to be heavy. So the last thing you want to do is be putting that up on a shelf or burying it in the back of the room in a closet that you can't drag out. So a good thing for that is to get yourself some Home Depot 5-gallon buckets, or go to somebody who's got like old pickle buckets, and put your soil and your gravel and your rocks and your sand in those. It's easier to carry those in and out, and it's easier to store them, and they won't get the bags won't get broken open. And then the one that's going to take up the most space is physical science. That's going to be the most material intensive. So that's the other category. And if you keep the content specific stuff kind of organized, then the rest of that stuff you can kind of keep all together too. The big one is food. The last thing you want to do is attract bugs and rodents.
We said we wanted to bring nature in your classroom, but not that nature.
Right.
That's different.
So those bags of rice are the
vinegar,
baking soda, flour. Those need to go every year. Cereal. The last thing you need. I mean, one lab we did, there must have been 10 bottles of vinegar. Some of it had been expired for 6 years.
Yeah.
So not only is it taking up space, it's obviously not being used, and it's expired. So you need to kind of keep all the food together so that when you get to the end of the year, you clean out that area.
I think that teachers, a lot of times, I had a hard time throwing stuff away. But once I went into enough classrooms and you start seeing just how gross things can get after 3-4 years, it becomes easier to throw away. And the tip here is, if there's an expiration date, throw it away, right? I mean, don't keep it
and I think the other thing that
you wouldn't do it in your refrigerator, right?
I think the other thing that's really hard for them is make sure the stuff is clean when you put it back away.
Yeah.
Especially if you have a checkout system, if you're in a science lab and you have a checkout system and people are coming to borrow stuff from you, when they bring it back, it needs to be clean, because then you're going to have test tubes or beakers with salt and everything that's hardened on the inside, and then you're just not going to use it because you don't want to take the time to clean it.
It'll get pushed to that back of that cabinet or whatever. But you brought up the lab situation, and I think in elementary classrooms especially, this becomes really interesting because a science lab is different from your everyday classroom, right? So your lab teachers, we've found, they like to go by not by reporting category but by letters, because A to Z in their organization systems, because the teachers who are borrowing things don't necessarily know the difference between earth science and physical science, right? So they just did everything. I just put rocks under R, Brandi, and I'm like, oh, that makes sense, because then my second grade ELA teacher, who just happens to be borrowing some rocks, she knows where to put the rocks back.
I think that was one of the kind of the most fun things. Whenever we would finish doing, say, a science lab, we would have all the science teachers come through and kind of walk through, and they would go, I didn't even know we had this stuff.
I know.
So it was like eye-opening to them what materials they would have available to use in their classrooms, because they didn't even know what was in there because they just avoided that space.
Or they were buying a lot of stuff on their own dime, that they had stuff in the lab. They had tons of it in the lab, but they were buying it themselves, so they were using their own money.
Or the PTO bought them more spring scales this year, and they had enough spring scales to give every child one on the campus. So we don't need spring scales anymore. We need something else.
Or hand lenses.
Yeah.
Or straws.
Right.
Those tend to be, you have a lot of those in your classroom, in your science lab specifically. So yeah, order is one of those things that takes a lot of time to create, but in the end, it's worth it. Because now if you're in a lab, your teachers have a really easy check-in and check-out system. They can find things really easily, but also your students can find things really easily. So
or your principal says, I have this much money, I have some money, I got to spend it by tomorrow. What do you need? If you're organized, I can go in and say, oh, I'm running low on this. I need some more of this. If it's all over the place, you're going to go, I don't know, I guess something, instead of really getting what you really feel like you need. So that's another reason to think about it.
Yeah, it saves money, honestly. Yeah. So we had a question on Twitter, and they're going really fast. I'm trying to find it. But they said, when can you start preparing your environment? Now, right? Right, just start now. We'll pick a step, or you can pick a step, get the rubric and go through the rubric with us. And if there's one idea that you hear someone say tonight or today, just do it.
Start with that, right.
Just start with that one, and just keep going. It'll snowball from there. You clean out one drawer, and then you have to clean all the drawers. You'll find it. Respectful peace, Lisa.
Yeah. So, a lot of times you go into the classroom and you're thinking, you see the same posters in every classroom, the CAM posters that everybody got. One of the things to help have a prepared environment is to actually have student work posted, their work posted up. Have them make the posters on what the states of matter are. Instead of buying the standard solid, liquid, and gas, have them make the posters.
It's more meaningful for them.
It's more meaningful, and have an area dedicated for student work. It's not graded student work. Oh, these people all got 100. Yeah. It's student work where they can have it up there and see what they've done. And then when the principal's walking through, she can see what are they working on in this classroom, and she can visually see it right there in that student work area.
They're showing pictures. I don't know if we can go back, but they're showing pictures of
the Wonderings.
They're showing the interactive bulletin
boards. So. One of the great things you can do with your students is called interactive bulletin boards. It's different from a regular bulletin board in that the students are going to have to manipulate something with the bulletin board. It's a great review for the students. It's a great way for them to show their understanding. For it, we actually started this out in the hallways because we used to be right next to the bathroom, and it used to always be so noisy out in the hallways outside my classroom. And so when the kids were waiting in line, they would be doing the interactive bulletin board and manipulating things and trying to connect a circuit with different items and getting the light bulb to light up. And it's used as a review. It's not used to introduce content, but it's used as a review. But it's also a great way for the students to show their understanding when they reach the conclusion of an area. And it's not just your same boring flat poster.
Right. It's so engaging. It's at a time of the day. It's a lost instructional time, right? Being in the hall is a lost instructional time, if you look at it. And this is a way, an interactive bulletin board is a way to take that time of standing in the line at the bathroom and make it, now we're reviewing for science. I put orders of the planets outside of my bathroom in my building, and kids really wanted to go to the bathroom a lot. We had to limit that, but they loved ordering the planets, even though they all knew the order of the planets. It was so fun for them.
Well, it reaches all the different types of learners because you're doing kinesthetic, and then it also helps because kids, where are they going to learn better from each other? So if they were a little quiet in the classroom or they weren't sure, they can be up there doing it with their classmates without the teacher looking over their shoulder.
Right. The pressure isn't on that interactive. And kids love them. Teachers love them, and kind of the sky's the limit. Like, you can be as creative. One of my favorite boards is the electricity one that you did, where literally they would put items and the bulb would literally light up. How amazing. Even a high schooler, I think, is engaged with that kind of thing. So I think any idea you have can happen. And my interactive bulletin boards, I had a parent helper that that was like, I made that her job. She really was excited.
Right.
She loved it.
And if you know, a little tip here, if you don't have a bulletin board, you can take a science fair project board that folds, and you can make that an interactive bulletin board, and you can pull those out at different times of the year after you've covered that content, and that could be an interactive bulletin board, and then you can pass that on to other classes and they can use those there. I think one of the best bulletin boards I liked was the 5th graders used to go away to camp, and they came back and they brought stuff they saw at camp and put it in little petri dishes and put it up on the wall outside the kindergarten classrooms, and then the kindergartners had little hand lenses and they would walk by and say, what did the 5th graders see at camp?
Right.
This is what I get to look forward to when I go there. So
very cool. We have a video that we want to show you about respectful peace in the classroom and about music and everything. So we're going to show you that video. So respectful peace, and this is really something about how your classroom is divided. So we call it distribution, student versus teacher distribution. So right now you have a lot of little stickers at the front of your classroom that say teacher zone, you know, because that's your area, and I guess that's kind of like you don't want the kids there, they might mess it up or something. And I understand that, but at the same time, when you look at the distribution of the classroom, you get the whole front area of the classroom, and the kids only get this little bitty area in front of them. So we want the classroom to be our classroom, not your classroom. And not necessarily just theirs, but ours together, a community, right? And so in order to make that community, I think we should really think about maybe taking those teacher zone signs down. And one specific sign I wanted to ask you about, it was the music, the boom box. You had that big boom box, but you had do not touch on it. So why?
Well, I mean, I don't like the kids touching it. I don't want them to think that they can listen to music during the class. So I usually just, that's for my entertainment. I usually just have it on my conference period or in the mornings to kind of relax. And kids do ask me a lot about it. They do want to bring in music, and I've never actually let them listen to music.
Okay, well, I marked you down for that.
Okay.
So, but you said something really great there. You said you put it on in the morning to help you relax, right?
Okay. I know where you're going.
You hear it. You heard it. That's good.
Yeah.
Okay, so why don't you think about the first of class, like right when the kids are walking in, right after that bell time, you're up at the front door greeting everyone, they're walking in. You could have some music playing, and it could be calm music. I'm sure you already have a ton of CDs and stuff, just something low that they can do. In my classroom, I always let the first kid in class be the one in charge of turning on the music, and then they wanted to get to class really fast, so that was always
I love
cool.
it.
Yeah. Okay, so one of the other things I want to talk about with respect and peace in prepared environment are these little chimes. I think a big part of the prepared environment and respect is respect for your students' work time. And I used chimes in my classroom as a way to kind of peacefully interrupt their work time. And I always would say, thank you, and then can I have your attention? Or if I was interrupting, if they were working on something really busy and they were really involved in what they were doing and I needed to interrupt, I would apologize. I'm so sorry, I need to interrupt, and then thank you for your attention. It was just manners of please and thank yous, and I think just showing them that in the classroom, it just makes it more likely that they'll return that kind of respect to you as the teacher. So the chimes are what I used. I've seen teachers use a gong, the other chimes that you can hit like a keyboard kind of thing. There's claps. I've heard teachers do claps and call outs and all of that. I like the chimes. I just think it's really zen. And
well, it's better than the jarring normal 1, 2, 3, where they're like, and then they just tune that out. something that's peaceful, that's not so jarring as a chime, like, oh, okay, I need to look up for a second and see what my teacher's asking.
Right, because we want to show them that we value the work that they're doing, and a peaceful interruption, I think, is a way to show that we really value the work and the learning that they're accomplishing at that moment. We have a question on Twitter from @Mr. Jason Maxwell, and he says, beyond setting up the physical environment, what else is needed to make a prepared environment successful? And Mr. Jason Maxwell, actually, that's the next part of our rubric, which is rigor. And when we talk about rigor in the rubric, we're really talking about the intellectual rigor of your lesson. And more specifically, we're really talking about Bloom's taxonomy and the questions that you're asking your kids. Because if you've prepared your physical environment, in other words, we've gotten our lesson together, we've got our lesson plans, we've got all the materials that we need to set up this hands-on experiment. But if you've gone ahead and created rigor, which is high-level questions for your students, when your kids are going around doing their interactive engage or whatever they're doing, you as the teacher are able to question them. You don't have to help them do it. Your hands aren't in the stuff. You're with them, in their mental space, and you're asking them questions. And I always told my teachers in the lab, in our professional development lab, I said, look, the lower level Bloom's questions, you've got those. You've got those off the top of your head. You don't need to think about, what does this word mean? What are you seeing? What's that an example of? Those recall kind of levels, they know. You can do that on the fly. But the higher level of Bloom's questions, your evaluate, your analysis, those are the questions that you really need to prep ahead of time. So I always said 3 questions prepared ahead of time. And I would have my teachers, I asked them to just write it on a notebook card, and then they could walk around to each group while they're doing the hands-on lessons, and they're asking that analysis question to all their groups. And it was kind of an informal assessment. It was a way for them to say, okay, my group in the back, they don't quite have it, but the group next to them really does. Maybe I can create some kind of thing where they peer teach each other or something.
Well, just putting the kids in groups to start with.
Right.
Help start that.
That's right.
Lead to rigor. Where you're walking around facilitating, just having the kids in groups to begin with is probably that first step.
That's true. Just getting them to look at each other so they can talk creates this place. We have some wall posters that we've created that in the past, I guess, that show all the different levels of Bloom's, and we did that as a reminder for the teacher, really, of all the different levels. And we've even done sentence stems, question stems, so that if the teacher didn't prepare the full question ahead of time, they had a STEM question on the board or on their wall somewhere so that they could be reminded and they could fill in the blank based on whatever concept they're working on. So even if you just had a question stem on your wall, that's something you could physically do to prepare the environment. One of my favorite books is actually a book we talked about in our first STEM chat, our STEMtalk, which was Teaching with Your Mouth Shut. And that is a book about the beauty of what you don't say in the classroom and how purposefully withholding certain things can actually create a situation where your kids can learn more because they'll develop it and they'll discover it on their own. That's another idea of just reading professional texts and trying ideas like that out in your classroom can really create an intellectual space, and it produces a lot of rigor in your classroom. If you're not, the teacher's not the one, the sage on the stage,
Right.
but the guide on the side, and it can really create more rigor in your classroom, just talking less.
And then the other one was the Wonderings wall.
Yes.
The Wondering wall was great. Kids had questions. They just went up and stuck it on the Wonderings wall. One, it helps you understand what misconceptions they might have, but it also helps you take it to another level. What are they still wanting to learn more about or have questions about? So that can help you when you're planning and thinking of your lesson for the next day. How can I address what they're wondering about?
Right. Well, and it's a place for your students to kind of push the boundaries of what they're thinking about and the connections that they're making in your classroom. We were doing, in my 5th grade science class, we did properties of matter. And on my I had a wonderings wall in the back corner of my classroom, and I noticed, like the week after we did this lesson, I had a bunch of questions about Titanic. And I thought, that is random. I couldn't understand why I had like 10 Titanic questions. I thought they must have seen a movie or a documentary or a book or something. And so I started talking to the kids about it. And they said, no, it's density, Mrs. Nicholson. They said, it's properties of matter, Mrs. Nicholson. And I was like, okay. So they made a connection there. Mm-hmm. But it was a genuine connection, you know. And had I not had that wondering wall space, I don't think we would have ever had this really interesting conversation with the kids. So it was a way to kind of get in their brains. It was really neat. Okay, so accessibility. This is our last. Oh no, wait.
It's different.
Oh yes. Oh my gosh, I almost forgot. So we have one of the main, other than the blooms, is different intelligences. And another place for Rigor is to create lessons and work in lessons that incorporate as many of the different intelligences as possible, because all of our students aren't one intelligence.
No.
And actually, we aren't one intelligence. We're actually, you know, an amalgamation of all these different intelligences. And so making sure that our lessons use as many of the intelligences as possible, it allows for us to meet our students, our learners, where they're at. Do we have those
slides?
Those slides? Perfect. So this is STEMscopes. We know our product. We know that a lot of you guys out there use it, and if you don't, we hope you go check it out. But one of the things that we're most proud of on STEMscopes is that we've really created an all-encompassing program where a student of any our teacher can do any intelligence with their kids. So here we show you where musical and rhythmic intelligence, multiple intelligence comes in through our Science Rocks, mm-hmm. which are great music videos. They're on standard. They're about the content that we're talking about, and they're neat music videos, and they're fun. The kids love to sing to them and listen. That could be some music that's playing when the kids are doing some work. For visual and spatial, you see them all across our lesson. In everything, really, visual and spatial, because it's all hands-on. It's all things they can see and touch and manipulate in some way. Kinesthetic everywhere, because we are a company and we are a curriculum who's all about getting kids moving and hands-on. It's hard to be hands-on and not kinesthetic. So we are kinesthetic in every aspect.
We like to joke. We like to see butts in the air.
That's
we want
right.
kids engaged and up out of their seats, working together.
Right. How do you know if your class is engaged? Are their butts out of their chair? And if they are, then your kids are probably engaged, because they can't sit still. They're so excited. What else? We have interpersonal. This is where the kids can work kind of on their own. They can create their own personal understanding of concepts. We do that through introduction, and then of course through evaluations at the end. Verbal linguistic, this is where they work together. They are in groups. Tonight we've talked a lot about grouping your kids at tables and having them talk to each other and working together. So it's natural that the curriculum that we've created really lends itself to group work.
Right. I think one of the questions we had was from, I think it was Whitney Dove, like, what could if I had to do one thing mm-hmm. to start with, I would say put your kids in groups. First thing I did was want to trade my desk for tables.
Right.
You know, one, it's going to take up less space, but I want the kids working together. That would be first step is get the kids working. They're going to be doing hands-on mm-hmm. investigations, and we want them working together. We want them questioning each other, mm-hmm. Coming up with their own meaning. So that's the first thing is
absolutely
push the desks together or get tables and get the kids working together.
And she asks specifically, I love her question because she specifically asks about high school. She mm-hmm. says, if I could make one change in my high school classroom, what should it be? And that's it. It's put those desks together in a group mm-hmm. because that's where conversations are made, and especially with high schoolers, those conversations are where the aha moments are made, and they're just amazing. Right. So put those tables together, Whitney.
Right. So, and we touched on some of this, but I want to kind of go back to like some of the physical stuff in your
Right.
classroom and talk about accessibility. We talked about how you can organize your science materials. And we had one slide a while back that showed the teacher had the little cubbies where the students kept all of their journals. There needs to be a centralized place for classroom supplies. If you put bins on your desks, or like I did, I got one of those like toy containers from Target. They had the little plastic tubs and they're slanted and it's 3 high. And that's where I kept all the supplies in them, and the kids just went over there and get them. The main goal that you want is the kids to know where everything is, and they just go get it, and they don't have to come up to you and say, where are the colored pencils? I need glue, I need a thermometer, where's the measuring tape, I need a timer. That stuff is all there. And one of the biggest things that we had to change the thinking of teachers was not to put all the science tools in the closet.
Right.
So we're wanting our philosophy is having the kids do hands-on science. So what are they going to be using to do hands-on science? Graduated cylinders, beakers, balances,
Right.
microscopes. And where was that stuff all the time? In the closet.
That's right.
And they had to go search, hunt, and find it. That stuff needs to be, that's the first thing we did. If you have to make space for anything outside of the closet, is make space for your tools you're going to use for science, because they should be using that stuff every
All the
week,
time.
all the time. So why do you keep putting that stuff back in the closet when I'm going to have to use beakers again tomorrow?
Right.
Or I'm going to have to use graduated
Timer.
cylinders tomorrow. I'm going to need my thermometers again tomorrow. So that's the first thing, is to get that stuff out and accessible for the students.
Well, and if it's accessible, then if the kids have a question, a genuine, meaningful question that they've come up with, they can test it on the spot.
Right.
Right?
Right.
We have a great lab actually on STEMcoach or STEMscopes where the kids test with ramps. And I remember in my 5th grade classroom, I had them measuring with rulers, right? Because as a science teacher, I knew that that's the way we were supposed to do it. But I had a group of kids that said, well, I want to measure with my timer. I knew it wasn't what they should be doing, but again, because I'd read Teaching with My Mouth Shut, that was a moment where I could say, oh, why don't you try that out? And so then they just went and got their timers and they tried it out. And then they came back and said, that didn't work so well, Mrs. Nicholson. And I said, well, now you know. But they actually got to find out for themselves because it was accessible to them. If I'd had those timers buried, they couldn't have tried it. So part of being a real hands-on classroom in a real prepared environment is if they get the inspiration. This is where that fluffy Montessori definition of prepared environment comes in. If they get the inspiration to learn something, it's accessible to them so that they can go and they can have that discovery on their own. I don't need to make that for them as a teacher.
So one of the other things to look at, we're talking about a lot, like how you can organize your own classroom, but what if you're a science lab teacher and you have lots of people coming and wanting to check out materials from you? Or if you're in a middle school and high school, you already have a science lab that you all have to share space with and check out stuff. So it's really important to have a checkout system that's going to be easy and work so that you know when things are checked out. I started off with just a 3x5 file cards and a Rolodex. The teacher wanted something. They filled it out, they turned in on a 3x5 card and they checked it out. And I used to have students periodically like, oh, I haven't had that returned yet. Go ask Mrs. Smith, are you done with these, and bring it back. It was as simple as that. It can start getting to where you have in the training lab, we had a clipboard, and the teachers wrote on the clipboard when they checked out something. And then if we'd seen it, they could have it checked out for a certain length of time, and after that certain length of time, we would be sending them an email, are you done with this stuff? To where you had a whole using technology system of using.
In KDISD, we had a really great technology grant, I guess. I'm not sure how they got the money for it, but we had a scanner. And we put it on the outside door in our lab. And so the teachers would scan their name, and then they would scan the material that they were borrowing. And so then it came up in a computer, and our lab teacher, or actually our professional coach, our campus coach, she knew what was checked out, who was checking it out. And then if they forgot to scan when they returned it, they would just go and scan, oh, it's there, it's back. But that was like a really, high-tech way to do it with just a little scanner, like when you get at like the wedding registry scanner. It was really kind of fun. Teachers liked it.
And if you don't have a checked out system or some way to know what people are borrowing, if you have kits in your classroom and teachers start pulling stuff out, and then somebody else comes behind, a teacher comes behind to use it, and there's none of that material in there because the teacher checked it out and didn't record it, you don't know, I need to get more batteries or I need to get more bulbs because we've used them out. So it's important to come up with a system that's going to work. Talk to the other teachers, think of a way that's going to be easy for them. I had students who used to help, so in the morning setup, in the lab in the morning, they could help check and say who has checked out something, or go follow up with the teacher if she needs this, go deliver it, have her sign for it and bring it back. So there's multiple ways that you can do that.
This is from @ReedWhitaker. Hi, Reed. You actually asked, you said, he quoted Lisa, get the stuff out of your closet and accessible to your students. A new take on a stuffy classroom. I think that's great. If you get it out of that closet, then everyone can use it. We want to talk about further steps. On Twitter, I'm looking at a lot of questions about how do I get started? When do I get started? What can I do? So we just thought we would do some kind of what we thought were some quick and easy ways that you could get started, kind of to wrap it up, and then we'll take some Twitter questions kind of at the end. One of the things that is always talked about is the shoestring budget.
Right.
I don't have any money, and bins cost money, or shelves cost money. We always use the plastic shoe bins at the lab because you could see
why do we
through
use
them.
plastic shoe bins? You know, it's really hard to know what you have
That's
in
right.
materials if it's in cardboard boxes that you can't see inside. So then you got to open it up and put inside. Whereas if you have shoe bins in clear, get
Right.
clear containers, you can visually see what's in there and know how much you have left in there, and you're not having to open up boxes and
they
look
can-
at it.
they
and
can stack.
They stack really well.
Really well.
And while you might not have as much issue in a middle school or high school with materials as you would in an elementary school, but one of the easiest ways to get materials is to do a supply drive.
That's right.
And at the beginning of the year in your classroom, you know, you can have a whole checkout list of these are all the things that I need, and one child can bring one box of Kleenex, or one child can bring one roll of paper towels, and somebody else can bring paper plates, and somebody else can bring plastic cups, and somebody else can bring straws, and you're going to have most of the consumable items you need. I actually changed my thinking on this. We used to be in science labs, and we would have all this consumable cups and straws and all this paper stuff, and then the teachers would all come out and take it, and there would be no consumable supplies left. I think you can almost, as an individual class, supply your class with that consumable stuff just by having each student bring in a different item, bring in baggies, one student bring in baggies.
And I know just in my daughter's school, outside of each teacher's classroom, they have a wish list. And the teachers, on a sticky note, they put what they would wish for. So they ask, like, what we picked was baby wipes, because I have a 2-year-old too. And so Ella said, oh, look, we have lots of baby wipes. So she took the baby wipe Post-it note off of her teacher's wish list. And then the next day, she came to school with a package of baby wipes with that little sticky note on there, and she gave it to her teacher. Why couldn't you do that with your materials that you're about to use in a lesson?
Right.
It's a great idea.
You can also always go to local businesses. A lot of local businesses will match or help you out. I will say a tip to that is to put it on your school stationery and write on your school stationery, I'm the science lab teacher, this is what I'd like. Okay, if you have an animal in the classroom, you can go to the local pet store. If you have a habitat, you can go to Home Depot. They always have broken open bags that they'll like practically give you for free or sell them pretty cheap.
Home Depot and Lowe's, I think, are two great businesses where you can go in, you can walk in, and Walmart too, really. You can walk in and say, I'm a teacher and this is what I need, and they help out. They support their teachers in their environment.
And ask your principal, who are your business partners?
Absolutely.
Because you have business partners and you can like put together a proposal, a letter, and say, this is what we're needing in our classroom. Is there any way you can help us with that? And then the next step is the right grants. There are lots of grants out there, and one of the best grants is Donors Choose, and it's specifically for you to get materials for your classroom. So I would encourage everybody to go to donorschoose.org, and it's a very easy grant to write, and it's for any kind of materials that you would need in your classroom. So there's always grants. Ask your principal if there's any grants out there, or ask your district. Some districts have their own foundation that give grants. So we've had lots of teachers who have gotten materials for their classroom just because their district has grants. And so if you don't write and try, you'll never get it.
That's
so
right.
you know.
And I know my grant that I received was within my district, and they came out and they were so excited. They actually had us go to a board meeting. And lots of teachers I know that we've worked with in the past, we say start with your district first, because they want to support their teachers. That's the whole point of those grants, is to support their teachers doing amazing work in the classrooms. So your district is always the first grant I'd say look at, and then go outside of that. For those last minute items, that's when I always say go check out Home Depot, go check out Lowe's, go check out Walmart. Those places can help in those, like, I need it next week kind of thing.
Even your grocery store, we used to get bottled water donated when we were going to be outside or on a field trip. And I would say if you get a grant or you have a local business that helps you out, follow up with pictures of the kids using the materials that you got from them.
That's right.
And that will also help you probably ask for more materials later. They like to be thanked and acknowledged for what they did to help you out in your classroom. And the kids always love taking pictures of themselves using it, or cards to take to the businesses.
That's right. Also, is what do you do when you have excess materials? Because when you prepare your environment, you're going to find a lot of stuff and a lot of things that you didn't realize that you had. I know a couple of schools that Lisa and I went to, they had straws to last for the next 20 years because they kept rebuying straws every year, and they didn't need to ever do that again. So what do you do with all the excess materials that you're going to find in your classroom? And
art teachers will love you.
Yes, your art teacher, your math teacher, basically everybody in the building can really benefit from preparing the science classroom environment, just because what we've done with our teachers is we create kits of materials. So your art teacher, you know what your art teacher might use. You could even, I had one teacher that she would take stuff into the teacher's lab or teacher's lounge, and she'd take a box and she'd, say anyone who needs this, and all the teachers, we can take this? And she said, yeah, it's just extra stuff for my classroom. We also have done where they did science kits, and they did a grade level kit of observation materials. One teacher, they found cool rocks. I mean, these rocks were this big. They were huge, beautiful. I mean, the most beautiful specimens that I've ever seen. They were buried at the back of the closet. She didn't even know she had them. And she probably had 20 pounds of rocks. And so we created observation station tubs that went around. So she had a lower L, upper L observation tubs, and they went around to every grade level, so that even those kindergarten and first and second grade classrooms that might not have that kind of thing, the teacher didn't do a lot of science, they at least had a tub of things that they could set up in their classroom.
And we used a lot, some of the stuff that we had extras of as like drawings, prizes on like Family Science Night. We had a whole bunch of little green microscopes, and we did those as door prizes on our Family Science Night. So that was a way to share the materials outside of the classroom with the students to be able to take home. Or
I love the classroom, the school that we worked with in Houston ISD, that sent in the summer, at the end of the year, they sent each of their students home with a little plastic bag, because they had that many of them left over. And in the plastic bag, they had a hand lens, and they had a little petri dish, and then the teacher wrote up a really nice little thing about being a scientist over the summer. And that's a really neat thing. They had that many hand lenses. She could probably do that for the next 10 years. That's how many hand lenses they had. I remember drawers of hand lenses when we started pulling them out. And what a neat way to take something home in the summer and just create an opportunity for your kids to keep learning in the summer. So really, you can do, it's endless, the things you could do with just whatever you find in your classroom. And I think you'll be really surprised once you start digging what you find. So we're going to go to some questions from Twitter. Our Twitter account is really going crazy right now. One question from @LauraArch. She said, does it have to be a science environment? Does prepared environment have to be a science thing?
No. You quite often, we're talking about science. Quite often, if you go and look into a language arts teacher, they'll have little lamps on, they'll have beanbag chairs and places for kids to read, and they've already started creating that environment in their classroom. And we just don't see that too much because science is so material intensive, and
Right.
they try to figure, they don't know where to put everything.
Right.
How do I set up spaces so that it's, I'm not overwhelmed with it. And so that's why we were working on trying to help make that in. But it can be any classroom. You're trying to create a learning area that you and your kids have worked with and will help them be engaged and want to come to school every day.
Right. I often say when we are giving the prepared environment, we've given this we have a presentation that we've given at conferences all over the U.S. and in classrooms and districts all over. And I always start by saying I think that the group of people who do the prepared environment naturally is actually our ELA teachers, right? They know that in their classroom they are going to have books available. They're going to have books at every reading level. They're going to be out and open for their kids. They're going to have a little comfortable space for their kids to sit and read. ELA teachers have naturally done this thing where they know that they have to create a space that makes their kids want to read. And they do that really successfully. And I feel like science can do that too. And that's what we're talking about by having all of the cool, let's be honest guys, our materials are cool. Science materials are cool. And having them out where everyone can see them and use them. And then having things like observation stations or interactive bulletin boards. Or animals. That's like our equivalent of having the pillows on the floor. It's a place where kids want to go and do science. So yeah, I mean, I think that a prepared environment is every classroom, all age levels. And another question from @Laura Arch, I want to end with this one. She says, is it too late for me to prepare my environment? No, it's never too late. Never, ever too late. So
and we're
start
always
now.
on a continuum, so just start, take one thing and just start with that one thing.
That's right. The easiest step, and then it'll snowball from there. You'll start finding more and more things that you want to do. So our rubric that we went through tonight on our STEMtalk, it's going to be available on STEMtalk on the website, on STEMcoach website. After the STEMtalk, it'll be available there, but it's also available on our YouTube in the links below. You have a little link that says the rubric, so you can go there and get it, or you can go to STEMcoach.com and get that. And we want to invite you guys to tune into our next STEMtalk, which is on October 7th. So we hope to see you guys again. And thank you, Lisa.
Yeah, thank you, Brandi.
I love this topic, and I'm so glad you got to come and talk with me. Bye.
Bye.